My name is Clara Sterling. In my hands, I was holding the blueprints for the Odyssey Tower, a $1.5 billion architectural marvel that had consumed 5 years of my life. Every beam, every pane of glass, every inch of its 90-story ascent over the Miami skyline was a piece of my soul etched onto paper. I stood in the wings of the press conference stage, the flashes of cameras like 1,000 tiny heartbeats, each one counting down to what I believed was my moment of coronation. My father, Arthur Sterling, the founder of Sterling Developments, walked to the podium. The air was electric with anticipation. I could almost feel the weight of the CEO title settling onto my shoulders. Then, he spoke the words that shattered my world into a million irreparable pieces. And the man who will lead this monumental project, the face of our company's future, is my son, Leo Sterling. The applause sounded like roaring static in my ears. I watched my younger brother, Leo, take the stage, waving to a crowd that didn't know he couldn't tell a load-bearing wall from a decorative column. In that single, blinding instant, my world didn't just crack, it imploded. This is the story of how I was betrayed by my own blood, how they lost a legacy, and how I built an empire far greater from its ashes. If you've ever felt your life's work get stolen from you in a heartbeat, give this video a like to let me know I'm not alone in this fight. This is not just my story. It's for anyone who has ever been underestimated. Before that crushing moment, before the applause for my brother became the soundtrack to my heartbreak, there was a different world. A world built of steel, concrete, and the relentless Florida sun. My earliest memories aren't of playgrounds. They're of construction sites scattered across Miami. While other kids were learning to ride bikes, I was learning the difference between architectural grades of concrete. My father, Arthur, was a titan in the world of real estate, and Sterling Developments was his kingdom. I wasn't just his daughter, I was his shadow, his apprentice. I'd spend hours in his office, my small hands tracing the intricate lines on blueprints, fascinated by how these drawings could command 1,000-ton structures to rise from the earth. He used to call me his diamond in the rough, his little architect who saw the world in angles and elevations. He'd hoist me onto his shoulders, pointing out across the sprawling city grid. "One day, Clara," he'd say, his voice filled with a pride that I now realize was conditional. "All of this will be a testament to what a Sterling can build." The business wasn't just a company to me. It was the very foundation of my identity, the blueprint of my life. I breathed it, I lived it, and I loved it more than anything. It's funny how our foundations shape us. I'd love to know where in the world you're watching this from, what city you call your foundation. Let me know in the comments below. Little did I know, another very different foundation was being laid right alongside mine. That other foundation was my brother, Leo. While I was spending my nights in the intense quiet hum of the design studios at MIT, graduating summa cum laude in architecture, Leo was navigating the sun-drenched social scene at USC. He majored in communications, but his real expertise was in charisma. His Instagram was a masterclass in curated luxury, yachts docked at sunset, exclusive parties in South Beach, and the effortless charm that drew people to him like moths to a flame. He was building a brand, while I was building buildings. Our contributions to Sterling Developments were a study in contrasts. I spent years mastering the complexities of structural engineering, zoning laws, and sustainable materials. I brought in a revolutionary new software that optimized our energy efficiency by 30%, saving millions. Meanwhile, Leo convinced our father to sponsor a high profile art festival, a move that got our company name mentioned in Vogue, but had no measurable return on investment. I saw our legacy in steel and glass, designed to last for centuries. He saw it in Instagram stories that disappeared in 24 hours. The problem was, my father, a man who built his empire on solid ground, started getting mesmerized by the glitter. He began to confuse online buzz with foundational value. He saw Leo's million followers and started seeing a million potential customers, failing to understand that they were following a lifestyle, not a blueprint. The language of our family business began to change. My world of metrics, materials, and master plans was slowly being overshadowed by his world of influencers, impressions, and image. And so, the unseen ceiling began to form above me, built not of glass, but of my father's shifting priorities. In 2022, I was the lead architect on the Azure Residences, a breathtaking 40-story condominium tower on Biscayne Bay. It was my vision, my design. It won the National Gold Medal for Architectural Excellence. My father's reaction, a firm handshake and a quiet, "Good work, Clara." It felt like getting a pat on the head for climbing Mount Everest. A few weeks later, Leo used his connections to get a reality TV star to post a single Instagram photo from one of the penthouse balconies. The post got 2 million likes. My father threw a lavish party at the Biltmore Hotel to celebrate Leo's visionary marketing achievement. I stood in that grand ballroom holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by people congratulating my brother for putting a spotlight on a building that I had literally willed into existence from dirt and dreams. I felt invisible, like a ghost haunting my own success. My detailed reports on structural integrity and long-term asset value were filed away, while Leo's social media analytics were framed on the wall. This became the pattern. I would secure a complex zoning variance, and he would get credit for smoothing things over with the city officials he played golf with. I would create a masterpiece, and he would sell the postcard. This is where I need your perspective. Comment with the number 1 if you believe tangible results and hard work should be the ultimate measure of success. Comment 2 if you think perception and marketing are just as, if not more, important in today's world. I'm genuinely curious what you all think. I knew I needed to do something so monumental, so undeniable, that even my father couldn't overlook it. I needed to build my masterpiece. And that masterpiece had a name: the Odyssey Tower. It wasn't just my answer to the unseen ceiling. It was my attempt to shatter it into a million pieces. For 5 years, the Odyssey Tower was my entire world. It was more than just a skyscraper. It was conceived as a vertical ecosystem, a landmark that would redefine the Miami skyline. I designed its twisting, organic form to mimic the flow of the Gulf Stream, a living structure that breathed with the city. This wasn't a project I was assigned. I created it from a single sketch in my notebook. I was the one who spent 18 months courting a notoriously difficult consortium of investors from Zurich, convincing them to commit $1.5 billion based on my vision and my numbers. I was the one who personally navigated the labyrinth of Miami's cutthroat zoning boards, battling for every single foot of airspace. When our engineers said the coastal winds were too strong, I collaborated with a German firm to develop a new type of hurricane resistant polymer glass that had never been used before. The tower was planned to be a marvel of sustainability, with cascading sky gardens at every 20th floor and a closed loop water recycling system that would reduce its environmental footprint by 60%. I poured every ounce of my being into it. Sleepless nights that bled into dawns, missed birthdays, canceled vacations. This wasn't just another building in my portfolio. It was my magnum opus. It was the undeniable, irrefutable proof of my capability, my dedication, and my worth. As the final permits were signed and the date for the launch announcement was set, I felt a sense of certainty I hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was my legacy. The day of the press conference felt like a coronation. We held it in the grand ballroom at the Fontainebleau, a space dripping with the kind of old-world glamour I knew my father loved. The room was packed. I saw faces from the Wall Street Journal, Architectural Digest, and in the front row, the stone-faced lead investor from our Zurich consortium, Mr. Brandt. I stood in the wings, my heart pounding a rhythm of triumph against my ribs. My father stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding the room as always. He spoke of legacy, of the future, of pushing the boundaries of what was possible. He painted a picture of Sterling Development's next chapter, and I saw myself as the author. "The Odyssey Tower," he boomed, his voice echoing, "is more than a building. It is a statement. And a statement of this magnitude requires a leader with a unique vision for the future." This was it. I took a deep breath, ready to step into the light. I am proud to announce that the executive lead on this project, the new face of our bold direction, will be my son, Leo Sterling. The name hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs, and the roar of the applause felt like an avalanche, burying me alive. I watched, paralyzed, as Leo, my charming, shallow brother, walked onto the stage, basking in the glow of a spotlight he hadn't earned, accepting praise for a vision he couldn't even comprehend. The flashes from the cameras felt like accusations, each one searing the image of his triumphant smile and my father's beaming pride into my memory. In that moment, I wasn't an architect or a leader. I was just a fool who had mistaken her father's business for her family. I don't remember leaving the ballroom. The next thing I knew, I was standing in my father's penthouse office, the glittering Miami skyline spread out before us like a city I no longer recognized. The celebratory champagne sat untouched on his marble desk. The silence was deafening. Why? It was the only word I could manage, my voice barely a whisper. He sighed, loosening his tie, the picture of a man burdened by a decision he believed was right. "Clara," he began, his tone patronizingly gentle, "you are the brain of this company. You are its heart. You pour the foundation and engineer the steel that holds us up. No one can ever take that away from you." He paused, letting the hollow praise hang in the air before delivering the final fatal blow. But leadership today is about more than that. It's about being the face. And Leo is the us. I stared at him, the words echoing in the vast space between us. The face. So my decade of dedication, my MIT degree, my award-winning designs, my billion-dollar negotiations, all of that was just the backstage machinery. My brother, with his charming smile and curated Instagram feed, was the main event. So my substance is a liability? I asked, my voice gaining a dangerous edge. My commitment is something to be hidden behind a more marketable personality? He wouldn't meet my eyes. The world has changed, was all he said. It's a terrible feeling when your greatest strengths are twisted into weaknesses. Tell me in the comments about a time you had to stand up and defend your own value against someone else's flawed perception. Your stories give me strength. In that moment, staring at the man I had spent my life trying to impress, I realized a cold, brutal truth. He didn't just misunderstand my value, he had willingly decided it was less important. Clarity is a funny thing. It can be a gentle dawn, but for me it was a lightning strike, burning away all the fog of hope and loyalty. I walked out of my father's office without another word. There was nothing left to say. The foundation he had built my life on was a lie. That night, I returned to the Sterling Development's headquarters. The building was silent, a sleeping giant that I knew better than anyone. My key card still worked. I went to my office not to pack up personal belongings, but to perform a final, necessary act of severance. For hours, I sat at my terminal, the only light coming from the glow of the monitor. I wasn't stealing company data. I was reclaiming my own intellectual property, my own soul. I meticulously copied every design file, every research document, every structural calculation that was born from my mind but had not yet been formally registered as a corporate asset. 5 years of work on the Odyssey Tower, 10 years of my life's innovations, it all flowed onto a single, encrypted hard drive. It felt less like a download and more like a blood transfusion, taking back the life I had poured into this place. When it was done, I took a sheet of my personal stationery, the one with a simple CS embossed at the top. I wrote just 3 sentences. I resign, effective immediately. All unregistered intellectual property developed by me is my own. Good luck with the new face. I left the note on my clean desk, next to my keycard. As I walked out of that building for the last time, the small, heavy hard drive in my bag felt more valuable than the entire billion-dollar tower I was leaving behind. It was my past, and my only key to a future. I couldn't stay in Miami. Every gleaming tower on the skyline felt like a monument to my own foolishness. I needed a new city, a new sky. So I packed 2 suitcases, put my condo up for sale, and drove on 300 miles west to Austin, Texas. I traded my penthouse overlooking the Atlantic for a small industrial loft apartment with exposed brick walls and a single window that looked out onto a graffiti-covered alley. My world shrank from a 50-person team and billion-dollar budgets to a single drafting table and the hum of a second-hand computer. The first few months were a brutal lesson in silence. For years, my phone had buzzed incessantly with calls from contractors, investors, and my father. Now the silence was so loud it was suffocating. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, thinking I was late for a project meeting that didn't exist. The identity of Clara Sterling, architectural prodigy of Sterling Developments, had been stripped away, and I was left with just Clara. And I had no idea who that was. I watched my savings account, once a symbol of my success, dwindle with every rent payment. Fear was a constant, cold companion. I spent a lot of nights just staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a massive mistake. Whatever time it is for you right now, whether it's early morning or late at night, just take a second. Have you ever had a moment where you had to completely reset your life? Amidst the doubt, A tiny, defiant spark began to glow. I still had the hard drive. I still had my mind. And in that quiet, empty loft, I slowly began to draw again. Not for a client, not for my father, but for myself. Drawing for myself reignited something I thought was extinguished: purpose. I started exploring Austin's vibrant community, and I stumbled upon an announcement for a local design competition. The city wanted to build a new, sustainable community center in a developing neighborhood. The prize money was modest, barely enough to cover my rent for a few months. But that wasn't the point. It was a chance to build something real again. For weeks, I poured everything into the proposal. In my tiny loft, I felt more like a scrappy startup founder than the heir to a real estate empire. I designed a structure that was both beautiful and profoundly functional, using reclaimed Texas limestone and a passive cooling system inspired by desert flowers. It was the most honest work I had ever done. I submitted my proposal anonymously, under registration number, not my name's. I didn't want the Sterling legacy, or its drama, to influence the judges. I just wanted my work, my ideas, to speak for themselves. The waiting was excruciating. Every email notification made my heart leap. Then, one Tuesday morning, an email from the Austin Community Foundation appeared in my inbox. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely click it open. The first word I saw was, "Congratulations." I read it 3 times, the single word validating my entire existence more than any multi-million-dollar project ever had. I hadn't won because I was a Sterling. I had won because I was a good architect. That afternoon, I went online and registered a new business. It was a simple, one-person LLC. I named it Aura Design because I was no longer building with steel and glass, but with the very essence of my own spirit. I finally had a foundations that no one could take away from me. As Aura Design began to flourish, whispers started to find their way from Miami to Austin. They came through hushed phone calls from former colleagues, and then in bold headlines in architectural journals. The Odyssey Tower, my father's symbol of the future, was in catastrophic failure. Construction had stalled at the 30th floor. The German firm that co-developed the polymer glass refused to work with Leo, citing his complete lack of technical understanding. The consortium of Swiss investors, led by the stoic Mr. Brandt, had officially pulled their funding, triggering a crisis of confidence that sent Sterling Development's value plummeting. The press, once so eager to celebrate, now called it the billion-dollar blunder. I read these articles with a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. The tower was still my dream, and watching it crumble felt like watching a part of myself die all over again. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, the past walked right through my office door. It was my father. He looked smaller than I remembered, the titan of industry replaced by a man hunched by the weight of his own miscalculation. He stood awkwardly in my small workspace, a stark contrast to the sprawling penthouse where we last spoke. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't talk about business. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "They're going to dismantle it, Clara," he said, staring out my window. "They're calling it the biggest public failure in Miami's history." He turned to me, his eyes pleading. "The banks are calling their loans, the family name, our legacy. It's all going to be wiped out. Please, you have to save it. Save us." He wasn't asking for a partner. He was asking for a savior. I looked at my father, the great Arthur Sterling, looking for a lifeline in the small Austin office he would never have stepped foot in a year ago. And in that moment, I felt no anger. I felt no pity. I felt only the calm, quiet power of my own hard-won value. I can't save Sterling Developments, I said, my voice even. That company was built on a flawed blueprint. His face fell, but I held up a hand. But I can create something new. The next week, my lawyers sent his lawyers a proposal. It wasn't a rescue plan. It was an acquisition. My company, Aura Design, would acquire the core assets and branding of the nearly bankrupt Sterling Developments, forming a new entity, the Aura Sterling Group. I would be the CEO. The Odyssey Tower would be redesigned and completed under my sole leadership. And Leo, he was offered a position in public relations, a role that fit his talents, reporting to a marketing director that I would hire. It was a clean slate, built not on sentiment, but on merit. This entire journey taught me a profound lesson. Sometimes, the people you expect to see your value most clearly are the ones most blinded to it. They may tell you that you are the heart or the brain, but that what the world really needs is a face. The truth is, a face is meaningless without a heart to give it life and a brain to give it purpose. You must be your own architect. You must draw your own blueprints and build your own foundation, even if it means starting with nothing in a tiny room, far from home. Your worth is not defined by the title you are given, but by the value you create. If you believe that your true legacy is the one you build with your own two hands, then hit that subscribe button and join this community of architects. Let's build our own stories together.